Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this video. In particular, this video is critical for the survival of humanity and life on Earth because it delves into concealed nuclear risks, things that are flying under the radar. We're not talking about Chernobyl and Fukushima. We're talking about unsafe conditions that exist at every single nuclear generating plant in the United States. Now, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is what's known as a captive regulator. That is, they are controlled by the industry that they are supposed to regulate. And even though their mission says they are supposed to be handling the risks to the public, they by far favor economic interests of the industry and sweep the risks to the public under the mat continually over many years. So Donna Gilmore, thank you again for joining me. And today we're going to narrow our discussion. We're going to discuss the casks versus the canisters. The canisters being the thin-walled system that's in use in the United States versus the casks, which are thicker-walled systems in use in the rest of the world.
We have in this country, there are some thick wall casks in the US. They're very few and far between, but there are some. In Europe and most of the world, Japan, Europe, most of the world, even Russia, they take these containers and they put the casks and they'll put them in buildings for additional environmental security protection. The thick casks in this country are just left out in the open. Now, they changed the thick cask design and put a lid over the lid to try and instead of a building, and it created moisture under the lid and started rusting the seals. So they actually took a good design and made it worse. I know some people, they're worried about, what if you lose electricity? The buildings that these thick casks are stored in are passively cooled.
In the rest of the world. In the United States.
Not in the United States. We don't have these in buildings. So.
I want to make that clear. Yes. All the checks are in the right-hand column, which is what most of the rest of the world is using.
Yes, yes.
And I notice no checks on the left-hand column, which is the system that the US is using. But I do notice that there's one notation that the thick casks, they do block gamma radiation and neutrons, but the thin canisters that are already in place in the United States don't block that leakage of radiation.
Well, that's why you have the concrete overpacks cast to block most of that, but then you have the air vents.
Again, to kind of orient this in people's minds, since we're just looking at one of each on the right, how many of these thin canister systems would you estimate there are in the United States, given that we have about 100?
There are over 3,200 in the United States.
Over 3,200?
Over 200, and there are more being added every year, So, and in June of 2013, there were 1,500.
The point I'm about to make is that we've had a more than doubling in the 7 years since then, approximately 7 years. So the numbers are going up rapidly.
Yeah. And then regarding transport, there's a regulation that requires that you ensure that the container, like the canister, and the contents are in a good enough condition to transport. But because within canisters, you can't find cracks and you can't inspect inside, we have no idea what condition they are in for transport. The thick ones, they check before they transport. They make sure the containers doesn't have problems, the basket is good inside, and the fuel is in a condition that it can be transported. In the United States, because we can't do that, what did the NRC do? They said, oh, just check the radiation levels. If they're not too high, you're good to go. That's what they actually approved.
Moving down one, I'll let you make.
All right, you know, this isn't nuclear science. This is common sense. Just think about it. Would you buy a car you could not inspect, repair, maintain, and has no early warning so you can fix problems rather than after you're going down that, you know, mountain road with your family?
So what we're talking about is to adjust this picture in my mind. Would you buy this car if the hood were welded shut and there was no dashboard with any indicator lights?
Yeah, no tire monitoring, no monitoring for leaks, nothing, you know, I mean, yeah, so.
Now,
can you imagine being on the road with your family? I mean, if you're qualified to not buy a car that don't meet those minimum requirements, you should feel qualified to say that you only want nuclear waste canisters that can be inspected and maintained, and you find and fix problems before it's too late, not after.
Moving on along, here we've got smiling President Chris Singh, who's the president of Holtec, that one of the 3 companies that makes these canisters. Is it safe to say they have the market share, the largest market share?
They're one of the largest, you know, I don't know if they have the market share at this point, but they're one of the main players. They're very well connected in Congress. And I was at the meeting where Chris Singh said this, and he admitted, because I made a big issue about the fact they can't inspect these canisters and they can't repair them. And then the moderator of the meeting turned to Chris Singh and what do you say about what Ms. Gilmore says? And he admitted it, and we have it on video. It's not practical to repair a canister if it was damaged. You will have, in the face of trying to do that, millions of curies of radioactivity coming out of the canister. We think it's not a path forward. So he has sold us $4 million a pop with labor, containers that he knows you can't repair, and they're buying them. And there's a link, you know, we have the video of the full statement and transcript available.
Well, in my personal belief, it's not practical to repair a canister if it were damaged. If it had a through wall damage, first you prevent it, but in the most unlikely circumstance, if that canister were to develop a leak, let's be realistic, you have to find it, that crack where it might be, and then find a means to repair it. You will have, in the face of millions of curies of radioactivity that is coming out of the canister, we think it's not a path forward. However, you can easily isolate that canister in a cask that keeps it cool, and basically you have provided a next confinement boundary. You're not relying on the canister. So that is a practical way to deal with it, and that's the way we advocate for our clients. My personal position is that a canister that develops a microscopic crack, and all it takes is a microscopic crack, you're going to get released, to precisely locate it itself, is location where it will occur is a tall order. And then if you try to repair it remotely by welding, and of course remotely you can go and weld, but the problem with that is that you create a rough surface which becomes a nucleation site for corrosion down the road. ASME Section 3 Class 1 has some very significant requirements on making repairs of Class 1 structures like the canister. So I, as a pragmatic technical solution, I don't advocate repairing the canister.
So again, NRC is the Nuclear Rubber Stamp Commission.
Right. I mean, I actually made comments to the NRC, official comments, saying that they shouldn't approve this new model canister system because they don't address the cracking issue. And their response was, well, we don't expect problems in the first 20 years. And this is only a 20-year license.
Even though the waste inside stays hot in nuclear terms for hundreds of thousands of years.
Right.
Actually, I have a chart of the composition, the radioactive isotopes in that nuclear waste, and some of them have half-lives in the millions of years.
Yes, yes.
And so because the license was only asked for 20 years, the Nuclear Rubber Stamp Commission approved it.
Yeah, and they, in terms of, so Holtec and the NRC both admit that if water were to get inside the canisters through cracks, you would have an uncontrolled nuclear fission reaction as long as the water's in there. But the reason the NRC approved it is they said, well, that's never going to happen because we're never going to have through-wall cracks. That was their justification to approve that system. It was shocking.
I want to say, what have these guys been smoking?
Well, you know, I've studied the people at various levels, whether it's the utilities, the workers, the NRC managers, working levels, you know, trying to understand why is this happening. They are a bit delusional. I mean, where, you know, their job or the power or whatever they're getting out of this is causing them to be a bit in denial and filtering out this reality. They just assume, well, nothing's going to go wrong. It'll be okay. Somebody will figure it out. I mean, Mark Lumbar said, Donna, you worry too much. They always figure this stuff out. And I said, what do you mean? Look at Hanford. It's leaking radiation into the Columbia River. Oh, well, we're better than the DOE. I mean, these are the kind of arguments I'm getting. So
the NRC ignores public safety concerns. They ignore the canister aging issues. They don't have a backup plan if anything goes wrong. And they ignore unsafe storage and potential transport problems. I say potential because the federal government has not got a place to put it, so they haven't picked any of this up. There's been no nuclear garbage collection, so to speak. My God. Okay, let's go back for a moment to at least let's take a look at what a safer system would have looked like. And this again is the system this particular one is in use in France and in Germany. And we know about German engineering. German engineering is supposed to be best in the world. And they are using this kind of system.
Yes, yeah, so they in fact, the Swiss use both. They use the Germans actually make the cast, ductile cast iron thick cast. The French are the ones that have the other thick cast. Orano is the company. The French will use the thick ones for themselves, but they can only sell us the thin ones because we don't buy, you know, quality here. Switzerland is a good example. They already have everything we need in production, and they've had it for years. You know, the monitoring, they use the highest level of thick casts that you can, you know, so they have a full monitoring system, a system for replacing and inspecting. It's all done in production. So this isn't some fantasy land. This is what we need to be doing in the United States.
And from my question earlier, you said it's not a matter of being twice or three times as expensive. It's 50% more, that the thin-walled ones are about $4 million and that the thick-walled casks are $6 million.
Yeah, and you know, and if you have a big job, you can probably get a better price on that. But I mean, we have more waste than any other country, so we have a lot of bargaining power here. And
we're also the most cost conscious, the least risk averse, and the most cost conscious.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I thought this was a very interesting photo. You told me that the thick-walled casks actually survived the earthquake and tsunami at Fukushima.
The 9.0 earthquake at Fukushima, the thick cast survived it. The thin canisters, if you have partial cracks in them, they haven't been evaluated for earthquakes at all. Yeah, so at Fukushima, they store their casts, the thick casts, in buildings. They happen to store these horizontal. And this went through a tsunami and earthquake and survived it. And they were able to inspect inside to ensure everything was still in good condition.
Comparison, this is German storage.
Right. In a building, fully monitored, clean, hardened facility, passively cooled.
And finally, we have the Swiss thick cast storage, also
Right.
inside a building.
Yes. And on the Swiss, they have some really great videos of their systems and how they do things. So it would definitely be worth people watching those. So yeah, this is a similar kind of system there. These are thick wall cast systems. No air vents in thick wall cast. You don't need air vents. They use a different kind of cooling system. The cooling goes through the walls, transfers through the walls.
Interesting. Well, Donna, you've given me more than enough reason to have nightmares tonight.
Yeah, no, I mean, if we don't replace these canisters with thick wall casts, I mean, each canister holds the radiation that was released from the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster. And that waste with a hydrogen gas explosion, it's going to go wherever the winds take it. And like the campfire in California a few years ago, NASA has a map showing how the smoke went across the country, and the same thing.
It's happening now with the fires that are in place on the West Coast.
Right.
The entire country is being blanketed with smoke at times.
Yeah. The only difference is you won't be able to see it.
It'll just be radiation. Invisible.
Yes. And you won't be able to clean it up. It's not going to go away.
And it'll be deposited on our cornfields, our soil.
Water supplies.
It'll give a new meaning to the word organic. There won't be any organic produce anymore in the United States because it'll all be radiation contaminated. And I want to go back to what you said, but you said it quickly, that each one of these thin-walled canisters, which you and I regard as accidents waiting to happen, over 3,200 of them, each one of them contains the equivalent radiation to what was leaked in the entire Chernobyl accident.
Yeah, roughly the same amount of cesium-137 and 3 times the plutonium released from Chernobyl. So
Same
this
order of magnitude.
So even one can is you don't want that. And then when you're faced with for example in California, you're talking about the 5th largest economy in the world. 40% of the produce for the nation comes from California, for the whole country. 40% of the cargo imports and exports. So this is you figure the same thing on the East Coast. You talk about, New York and that kind of thing. You've got the same kind of risk there. So this is not a local issue, and the radiation damages your DNA for your generation, for future generations. This is a huge issue, and we have to change the way waste is stored. And with some canisters already 27 years old, we are on borrowed time.
And I put up this image so that our viewers can see each of those pointers is a pointer to a nuclear power plant, or perhaps some of them are military facilities. I'm not sure, but they're high density on the eastern seaboard, the Midwest, and then along the West Coast, there are a bunch of them as well. And each one of these is a potential problem. Each one of these has.
Yes, and there's hundreds. Illinois takes the prize for having more reactors and waste than everyone else. But you can see more of the concentration is on the east. But how many Chernobyls do we need in this country to have it be too many?
And again, I was asked to produce these videos by members of the U.S. intelligence community who are deeply concerned about this under the radar risk that's certainly not being addressed or announced or leaked by the official government sources. And they are concerned that we may have an event. It may come shortly with the COVID epidemic and with the state of the world being as it is, with China and the United States rattling sabers at one another, with North Korea nuclear armed, and we're looking at huge risk, unimaginable risk that we're taking.
You're focusing on terrorists, but who needs terrorists when you got Holtec here?
Yeah, the enemy with win.
Yes, exactly. These companies will sell whatever you want to buy. They don't care. They'll make better, So it's really the customer here, our utilities and our regulatory agency. And by the way, cost issues are within state jurisdiction, because a lot of this, so there are things that states can do, but that would be a whole nother session on, what do we do now? But this is an awareness session.
Well, one can say that capitalism has no conscience. Corporations have no conscience.
Yeah, well, to be fair, most of the people in the world, in the country, do not know this. They're not being told the truth about dry storage. They're being told it's safe when it isn't. So really, we need an education on this. And so it's not just bad players out here. I mean, maybe the utilities, yes, but most people have no idea this is going on, and there will be people telling them that it's not true. So that's part of the problem, is to get the truth out to the people that can change what's happening now and have them believe it.
Well, thank you very much again today for helping me get the truth out. And we've certainly got enough material from our conversation today to do not just one, but several videos. So let's get to work editing it and getting this information out in the public domain. Thank you.
I really appreciate you doing this. It's desperately needed. Thank you very much.
And we'll be speaking more in the near future.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.